So for anyone that doesn't know me, I'm Franco Musso. I'm based in the UK, Power Pages freelancer. I like to spend as much of the year traveling as possible. I've never had a permanent role. That's usually an interesting talking point, apart from I did do the management program at McDonald's and worked everything from front of house, kitchen, cleaner, bit of everything. Father of 4 daughters. I don't do Microsoft certs. That's usually, again, just a bit of controversy. Never stopped me in the permanent world, in the freelance world. Maybe the difference in the permanent world. If you want to connect with me, if we're not already connected, there's LinkedIn, my blog, and X as well. So let's get into this UI UX accessibility in Power Pages. So there's a lot built into Power Pages. It's a really carefully designed framework that includes a lot of elements you might not have been aware of behind the scenes. So what I plan to cover is an arsenal of accessible, user-friendly UI components that are available to us and some design patterns that will unlock intuitive user experiences. And what I mean by that is we're going to look at apps that we use every day. So even if your team aren't necessarily very visual or experienced in UX, or even a user base necessarily isn't experienced in UX and they're responsible for coming up with the requirements, I'm going to show you a bit of inspiration and the kind of things that I'll take cues from. So that'll usually start with apps that I use every day. So even though your user base might not feel that they've got a great amount of experience with apps and with user experience, UI and layouts, they're most likely going to be using professionally designed apps every day, whether that's on Apple, Android, even on smart TVs, interacting with kiosks. There's a lot more about them what you might realize. So for example, a lot of us use internet banking, and what I'm going to try and do is just show a few example screens, click through those and see how that might relate to the apps that we build. So there are certain components, whether it's a Canvas app, model-driven app, or in my case, Power Pages, where there are different kinds of common UI elements we're going to be dealing with day in and day out. So typically, when we land in an app, we want a useful jumping off point. So that'll typically be a dashboard. What's all the information that I need to know at a glance before I make the next move? If we're doing a good UI, if we want to provide that heads-up view, so if I was overdrawn £1 million, don't have to be 5 clicks in before I notice that. That's going to be jumping out at me front and center. So I'm going to open up my current account. I can see some transactions. So this might be familiar if you think of the Dataverse world. This is like a form showing a subgrid. So the record I'm on would be my account and the subgrid showing the transactions. So what have I spent, when, and what's the amount? I've got some options to expand on that. So if I click the ellipsis, I've got various form level actions. So actions that are specific to this main record, the account. If instead I was to click on a particular transaction, maybe I want to find some more information about that. So this, I'd be thinking about building into my app design. How can I drill in for extra information? So I can see the transaction ID, when it happened, which card I used, and possibly the format of the transaction as well. Was it Cash Point? Was it Apple Pay, Android Pay? And if I click the ellipsis now, let's see how I can go through a guided process. So this is something we do a lot in Power Pages as well. So I've seen that's opening up in a modal. That's what I would call that type of interaction. That's what it's called in Bootstrap. And I might want to do something with that. So I want to take that, some of the balance from my current account and provide it from transfer. So you see, I'm going a few steps away from where I was. There's some visual cues to help show me that I'm still within the context of the current account. I'm going to choose who to pay. And I can either transfer between my accounts or choose to someone that I've transferred to before. So these, again, I'm going to be assuming that all my user base are familiar with these kind of things. But when I show you Bootstrap components, you'll see we've got things like modals, list groups, buttons, all that allows us to easily piece this stuff together. So I'm going to transfer that to my classic account. I'm going to go ahead with the full £1 million. And unfortunately, I don't have sufficient balance. But again, you'll see there, that's something that's available to us in Bootstrap. That's an alert, and that's a way to provide some timely information. So in this case, it's on submission of a form if there's any blockers. Likewise, it could be on change of a field. And these are all the kind of things that I know my user base are going to be familiar with these types of interactions. And that's what I'm going to try and build into my app. With a mail app, this is another common use pattern. It's not always necessarily mobile. It just happens to be that I've got mobile screenshots for this. But this is another pattern that we used to. So if there's maybe some high volume actions that we need the customer to do, perhaps an inbox type interface, even if it's not emails necessarily, maybe it's triaging cases. This could be a familiar pattern for us to look at. So maybe these could be cases of different statuses, which is very much how mail's treated in the app. So if you imagine the same message could be unread, it could be draft, already sent, could be marked as junk, it could be deactivated, which would put it into the bin status. When I click through to an inbox, I've got a list. So again, familiar pattern from what we see in model-driven apps or Canvas apps or Power Pages, and I'd expect to be able to drill through to those. And when I drill through, I see a single record on a form. In this case, it happens to be rendered as HTML as an email message. And I might want to perform some actions on that. So I've got toolbar across the bottom. That again is a component that we've got in Bootstrap. So I'd be looking at a nav bar for that. And then I've got a list of actions. That would be a list group, typically in Bootstrap. I mentioned Bootstrap a lot. You'll see later that is something we get bundled in all of the Power Pages sites that we build, all of the portals. That's the relevance of that. But I can perform any actions on there. So, for example, reply, flag, and typically that would either generate me a new record or it would change the status of an existing record. But what you'll see as I go through all these various examples, I'll not bore you with too many more, but even though we've got very different use cases, Audible, the mail app, Spotify, internet banking, there's a lot of commonality in there. So likewise, again, where do I land? I land on a dashboard. There'd be no point on my first login just going to an empty app and waiting for me to go and populate that screen. They're at least going to provide me some recommendations. So here's what I've been listening to lately. Here's what they want to promote, some podcasts. I've got, again, the toolbar across the bottom. I'm going to open up my library, see some of my playlists. I can click through to one of those. And again, I'm taken to some familiar interface. So I've got a form, the main record there being a playlist, and I've got a list of tracks. So that for me is very much like a subgrid, again, whether that's Canvas apps, model-driven apps, Power Pages, and I've got some actions that I can I can perform on the playlist itself. Maybe I want to add some songs, I want to download it, share it, I want to create a jam with someone else. But in this example, I'm going to add a song. And again, I've got some kind of clickable interface. So I'm now looking at related records and I can build relationships from the screen as well. Perhaps there are tracks that I want to perform, actions that I want to perform within the subgrid as well. So maybe I want to do something with that song, Girls Like, maybe I want to like that track. I want to have it more easily accessible throughout the app. So that, again, something that I'm thinking about, maybe an unwritten requirement. I say maybe, definitely an unwritten requirement on a lot of my portals is something like the like, bookmark, favorite kind of feature, allowing that level of personalization. And final example, Audible, just in case it's something that you've used before, but we've got the idea. You land in a dashboard, you see your frequently visited content rather than just a blank starting point. I see the context of I'm already playing a particular book. I can open up my library. Again, I would expect to see not just a list of the books in my library, but what can I do with those? So let's say Atomic Habits. Maybe I want to write and review that. That takes me to a form. I can play the book, and then click through to leave that review. So that all to me feels very intuitive and also very consistent. So when I'm building my Power Pages experiences, my user flows are all tying back to what is going to be intuitive to that user. What are they expecting to be able to do with each item? What kind of context do they need in each of the screens? What context do they need on that initial landing page on that dashboard? So a lot of us in the audience aren't professional UX designers. We haven't got the budget of Spotify, of Audible, of Apple. So how the heck can we achieve that? So on my Power Pages project, I'm going to be thinking about what's the level of complexity, what's the difficulty level. That could be based on budget, it could be based on who's the team, who has to support this after it's gone live, and that'll dictate how difficult I can go with this. So the lowest level of complexity would be I'm going to use the out-of-the-box forms and lists and maybe augment them with a bit of code. Medium would be I'm going to start from scratch. So not start from scratch, but I'm going to start from a blank page and pull in some components from Bootstrap. So I'm not having to write HTML, CSS, JavaScript from scratch, but I can choose from some really well-designed components like cards, lists, components, off-canvas menus, and get to a useful starting point very quickly. Or if it was high complexity, so a lot of the times I've got customers providing Figma and mock-ups that aren't really anything to do with Bootstrap. They're far away from what we get out of the box with Power Pages, and that's really where we'd get into high complexity or a high difficulty level. And if the timeline allows for that, all good. But typically what I would do, even on the same project, if I know we're going to end up at high complexity, I will still start at low. So I will do my minimum viable product using only out-of-the-box components with the odd bit of code here and there, and just prove out, right, so are we 100% sure, is it a conscious decision that what you want to achieve is beyond this forms over lists experience, or is this maybe 80% of where we want to get to, and we'll take the different approach. I usually send us down the medium complexity route that we'll use Bootstrap. So just know how you've got those options. So lots of what I'm going to cover, including Bootstrap, responsive, and testability, is all still totally doable with the out-of-the-box components as well. The main difference is going to be just how much is that look and feel different from your out-of-the-box starting point. So I'm going to take you through some of my go-to components now. And what I'm thinking about is mapping out those user journeys. So I've mentioned Bootstrap quite a few times. What is Bootstrap? It's the most popular front-end framework in the world, and the reason that it's relevant with Power Pages is that it's bundled into every Power Pages site you'll ever create. So until quite recently, we were still on a 10-plus-year-old version of Bootstrap 3.6. Now we're on 5.2, which comes with all kinds of cool new components, which I'll take you through in just a moment. So we don't have to start from scratch. This is great. So we're not having to write HTML, CSS, JavaScript from scratch for a heck of a lot of functionality. I'll take you through just a limited set of that, but know there's tons more. I'll show you where to find that. So the great news is we get to rely on a massive library of professional components that have been designed and built by world famous front-end designers, aka not Microsoft, not the geeks that we usually deal with for the day-to-day UI stuff in Canvas apps, model-driven, and they're battle-tested on millions of websites. So unlike all the cool components we get in Canvas apps, we're not having to temper that with, oh, here's exactly what I want, but damn it, it's in preview and I can't use it on my real-life project. So we get all this with Bootstrap, and I said it comes with every single portal anyway, so there's no additional step to have to integrate it or anything like that. So some of my go-to components, I'll show you on the Bootstrap site in just a moment, but cards, I think you'll have to have been living under a rock not to have seen cards pop up everywhere on all kinds of different websites, including Microsoft's, including SharePoint, within the Maker portal as well. Collapse, so things like accordions, where you've got expandable, collapsible areas of the screen. Modals, I'll show you a few examples of where I've customized those, but these are good for where we've got some just-in-time content or just-in-case content. So maybe when we're considering a mobile layout, not every bit of information or not every button is vital enough to keep on screen at all times, but maybe we just want to draw in some extra information as and when the user requests it. Nav and tabs, so things like our fixed toolbar that we saw at the bottom of the screen on Audible, on Spotify, in the Mail app, that's all stuff that we've got ready built within Bootstrap as well. And accordions. There's many more. I say I'll show you where to go and find those. But a really important concept in responsive for the web is breakpoints. So I saw Keith did a great job of showing this in his responsive Canvas app session. So what we've got within Bootstrap and on all our Power Pages sites already out of the box is we've got this set of breakpoints, which is really flexible. So it's from a mobile first point of view. So if we don't specify any particular size, if I just say I want this to be col3, meaning 3/12 of the width of the screen, that will work for all sizes, so mobile and above. And I can then say how many columns wide should that be, how many twelfths for small, for medium, for large, or extra, extra large. And these are the resolutions that applies to as well, if any help. So I can say for the exact same element, at mobile size, it should be col12, so full width of the screen. But perhaps once we get up to large, it should be col6. And when it gets up to XXL, it should be col3, meaning it's either the whole width at mobile, it's half the width at large, and it's a quarter of the width at extra large. I'm not having to write any CSS for that. I'm not having to write media queries or anything complex like that. I simply just add that little prefix into the HTML. And again, I'll show you some examples of that. But here's a top tip. A lot of you, I'm sure, will already know this if you've worked in websites and development at all before, but we can actually see the makeup of any site in the world, any website we go and visit. Unlike a Canvas app or a model-driven app, perhaps we can see exactly how that's made. So the not-so-secret sauce, what we'll do, in fact, I'll show you when we go through some examples in a moment, is that we can see exactly the HTML, the CSS, the JavaScript that any page is made of. So just bring up an example. So this is a Power Pages site that I've built for a sports portfolio platform. So a few of the Bootstrap elements that I've got in use on this are off canvas. So what we mean by off canvas, again, is that just-in-time content. So I've got limited real estate. I've got certain elements I only want to bring in as and when the user requests them. So things like the navigation, not having to take up space all the time for that. Things like the either sign in or edit my profile section only comes in as and when needed. And if I'm a coach accessing the site, I want to find a certain player or player with certain attributes, I can fire up the search, but again, only as and when it's needed. But as I said, the good news is that I can use the dev tools and just right-clicking anywhere on screen, choosing inspect, and I see the markup for everything. So you could use this on any site at all on the internet. It could be as simple as I know it's built with Bootstrap and I want to see which element it was. So this is a Bootstrap off canvas element, and it's set to show, and the position is start. So show you when we go on the Bootstrap site, there's a lot of variability and options built into these things. So I could say I want to show it on the left, the top, the right, the bottom. Likewise, maybe if I didn't know what is the element for a heading, I can just inspect that. This makes the web, as you can imagine, really easy to learn web development, because unlike a lot of other types of programming, this is completely transparent to us. So I can see that, right, yeah, I know that a heading, in this case, using a heading 3, there's the context. And in fact, I've highlighted a particular portion of that heading to be styled differently in this span. All of that is responsive as well. So I'll show you a few different examples of responsive, but it is all based on Bootstrap. So one of the examples I've got when we go into the mobile section is swapping out content. So I've got a banner image there that's really optimized for large screens, for wide screens. So when I get to maybe mobile resolution, it doesn't make sense to be showing that same wide content. So I've instead use a different image, and it's again based on that grid system. So I've said that for one of the elements, I want to hide it. In fact, not in exactly the right point, but here I can say on small resolutions, I don't want to show it, and otherwise I do want to show it as a black element. But again, not having to write JavaScript, CSS, breakpoints, or anything funky like that. I'm just using ready-built bits of Bootstrap. So this, as an example, is a nav bar from Bootstrap. The icons are font awesome, so that comes bundled with Bootstrap as well. Probably worth showing you that. So any of the icons that you see in the font awesome library, if you search for what you want, I'm searching for a search icon. If I choose the free option, all of these are included with Power Pages. There are, I think, thousands, in fact, within that library. So I don't need to upload these. I don't need to import them into a component library or anything like that. I just use it as per any font. And if I click on the one that I want, there's the HTML to include that. So you're getting a lot of starting points and a lot of helpers behind the scenes in Power Pages that you might not have been aware of. So I'm going to take you through now some top tips for mobile first experiences. And the way that I'm approaching this, again, is considering we've got a lot of beginners on there, or also from me trying to provide the best value to my customer base, is how do we achieve this with the absolute minimum code? And you can consider minimum code as me meaning minimum effort. Minimum effort meaning maximum profit, minimum turnaround time. So who's familiar with this one? Give us a show of hands. What we're promised is mobile optimized, and what we get is just a vertically stacked piece of crap. So it's not a nice experience, but it's kind of right. We've done the minimum requirement. We took your fancy busy layout and we've just stacked everything into an endless stream of content. That's not the way I feel we should be approaching mobile in 2025. So here are some of my go-to techniques, and I'll show you some examples of that either on the Bootstrap site or on some of my example portals. So first of all, swapping out content. I've shown you an example of that. So we conditionally hid the wide banner and showed the smaller image. I'll quickly show you another example of that. So go to the Proximo 3 website. In fact, sorry, wrong one. I need to learn to Google. My bad. Sorry, here's what I was going to show you. So we've got these tiles showing their valued customers. That's fine for this large resolution I've got at the moment. So showing this on a 4K display or laptop or something like that. Perfectly fine to horizontally. I showed them in a horizontal row. Typically what we would do when we minimize it down to a small screen is we would say vertically stack them. But if we're struggling for space, something we can do with Bootstrap is say, I want to swap that out. So in fact, when we get to small resolutions, I'm going to display that as a carousel instead. So you might have come across this on other mobile sites, in mobile apps or perhaps you're used to the horizontally scrolling cards. It's a nice, easy option using what I showed before to say at certain breakpoints, we want to show it in its full, at other breakpoints, we want to hide it. So with a little creativity, we can go beyond just that vertically stacked experience and provide something that's truly optimized. So I'd say we've got two ways to roll with this if you are getting your hands dirty with the code, is that if it's a template that we've got, it's something that we've created and we've got hands-on access to the code, it's nice and easy. We'll just lift and shift some code from Bootstrap. I'll show you where to find that. But other times there'll be screens and elements that we haven't got access to the code for, and for that, we'll have to use JavaScript to manipulate what's there on the screen. So we can wrap some content, we can change the markup as we need to. But again, I'd also be thinking as well, right, we're optimizing things for mobiles. Which elements do need to be on screen all the time? What's vital to the experience, and what is just kind of just-in-time content or just-in-case content? Can that go into a modal, an off-canvas, a tooltip, or something like that? So stacking vertically, yes, we can do it, but let's not use that as our go-to for everything. We've got off-canvas elements, like I've shown you, that can slide in from the left, from the right, from the top, from the bottom. We can make our modals full screen. That's a nice touch that I use quite often. So on large screens, if I open the modal and it's just a small central island, that's not too bad on a large screen. But if that's a small central island on a tiny mobile screen, that's not the best. I'll also put some effort into making my links tap friendly as well. So it might be nice and easy to click on my small buttons or the fine text on a large screen, but with my big clumsy fingers on mobile, probably not so much. I can look at clamping font sizes. So as the screen grows and shrinks, I can automatically adjust the font size, possibly like you would in a Canvas app, so basing it on percentages, but with a maximum and a minimum. I can make my buttons block, meaning that they'll take up the full width of the screen. So perhaps, again, certain screen sizes, it makes sense that it's a small inline button, but once we're below a certain resolution, I want to make that the whole width of the screen and nice and chunky and easy to click. I can truncate text. So if you imagine, maybe if you're in something like the Mail app on your iPhone and you've got a super long subject line, perhaps you don't want that to flow over line after line after line. You'll just see a certain portion of it, and then the ellipsis to show you that there's more that's not on screen at the moment. All of those things that I mentioned on screen, I think all apart from clamping font sizes, in fact, I can do just lifting and shifting code from the Bootstrap site, not having to write anything myself. And then as a last resort, I've got media queries and container queries. These are allowing me to get more pro code, I guess, in the sense that I can write some queries to say, right, in between specific sizes, I'm changing specific CSS rather than just lifting and shifting code from Bootstrap. So let me show you where that code comes from. That's the end of the slide, so don't worry, it won't be any more death by PowerPoint. So I'll drop this link in the chat as well, but the Bootstrap 5.2 docs is where I spend a lot of my time. And here's another good example, in fact, of a responsive layout. So here I am on a large screen, and I've got this 3-panel layout. So I've got the main content. To the left, I've got this list of content. On the right, I've got some quick links related to that page. I've got quite a busy navigation bar. Doesn't seem so bad on this high resolution display, but I've got the links, the logo, search, secondary links, version information. But as I scroll that down, Bootstrap actually, I think, do a really good example of what we might want to do here. So once I get below a certain screen size, you'll see everything gets simplified. So all that busy left-hand nav that I had before is now hidden away in this off-canvas menu. All that secondary information now available in here, like the version info, the links, the related information, and the search is now hidden away in this modal. So I click the icon, get the search. So that's an example of an off-canvas. This is an example of an off-canvas, and that is a modal. So I don't have to code any of that stuff, as I said. So where I would spend most of the time here on the Bootstrap site is looking at these components. So consider this if you're from the Canvas app world, much like your list of components or your component library ready built. So if I, for example, want an accordion, select accordion. I've got a few examples here ready. So as I said, there's usually quite a few variations. So these are built for maximum flexibility. So maybe I want that to be flush within some other element, like a card or a carousel or a modal. So that's what the flush version is for. I've got versions where each panel remains open, whereas the default behavior is only one is open at any one time. And for any of the components, useful to know, going back to the accessibility that Ambesh was covering before, there are accessibility tips for all of this. So they'll show you how accessibility is baked into that component. What are the attributes that you need to include to keep that accessible? So things like your ARIA attributes, roles, and all that good stuff. So collapse is one that I use quite often. Alerts, as we mentioned before, so we think back to the banking example, I'm trying to make a transfer for more than what I've got in my account that I'm showing an alert. Some of the variations we've got in that are the styles. So a lot of the Bootstrap components, they've got these different color variations of primary, secondary, success, danger, warning, info, light and dark, all for different contexts. We've got the option of including links, including icons, and none of that code we're having to create ourselves. So it would just be a matter of I come in here, copy that code, go and paste it into my Power Pages site. So that's why I consider this low code as opposed to pro code. I'm just lifting and shifting their stuff. Also, I can make that dismissible. Don't have to create any JavaScript, any CSS. Again, I just lift and shift that content. All it is in the markup I can see there's a class that says that should be dismissible. That's all that I need to do to take care of that. Cards, I'll show you some examples on my own sites in just a moment, but as I said, these are elements that I think are almost impossible to miss across the web. They're on just about every website and app that you can come across. And again, lots of variations with titles, subtitles, headers, footers, all that good stuff. So here are some various different cards that I've created for the baseball site. Try to go in with lots of different variations of those for different sizes. I appreciate we're not got too much time left, so I'll speed up. But there we go, all with mobile responsive considered. So how many columns should that take up at small versus medium versus large? Should I reflow the content? So you see that actually appears quite different below a certain size. Tab lists, so I can jump between, again, a way of saving space, really. So tabs are another component that we get out of the box with Bootstrap. The cards, again, adapting to be quite different for different screen sizes to make the most of the space that we've got. And then with modals, I've taken the absolute basics that you usually get from Bootstrap. So if I go to components and modals, what you're probably used to seeing with a modal is just your standard white modal with maybe with some context buttons on there with text content. I've spent the extra time on this site to say, well, in fact, I want it to be a more engaging model, a better branded model. So to start with, it's not white, it's in my brand colors. But some other changes are, maybe I want a 50-50 split. So perhaps you're used to that from things like welcome content, onboarding experiences are giving you some tips when you first land in an app. A dark variation of that. So I'm taking those out of the box components from Bootstrap, but I'm then skinning them. That's where I'm spending the effort doing the styling on my portals. So the users and the team that are picking this up after me have got an even bigger component library. So that's an example that I will use for something like a multi-set form. If there's maybe a guided process to purchase something, to sign up for something. Again, dark variation of that. Dark mode, in fact, is another benefit that we get with Bootstrap. Most of the elements, if not all, have got a dark mode built in. In fact, that one still needs a bit of work, but you see they don't have to look exactly like the Bootstrap ones. You can apply your own styling and branding to it, but we're letting Bootstrap do the heavy lifting for us for sure. And yeah, so another variation of the cards that might be useful to show is, again, going back to those breakpoints. So when I'm deciding how many columns of the screen put it up into 12 columns. How many do I want each card to take up? So with this bit of HTML, what I'm saying is, by default, take up 12 twelfths, so the full width of the screen. But then at small resolutions, you can take up 6 twelfths, so it'll be half the width. Same for medium, but then at large, it should be 3 twelfths, which is why I'm getting one card equals 1/4 of the screen. And as I scale that down, you'll see the layout of the card adapts, the size adapts right down to mobile. And this is really what this particular site was optimized for mobile, because scouts, coaches, players, most likely we expect going to be using that from the baseball stadium as opposed, or the training field, as opposed to back in the office.